Envision standing on the bank of a small river, now situated within the Ukrainian steppes. It's the autumn of 1362. Directly before you stretches a Mongol army, the descendants of warriors who once instilled fear across an entire continent. Behind you are the Lithuanian forces, a people still regarded by most Europeans as uncivilized pagans. Within a few hours, a battle will unfold, its outcome drastically reshaping the balance of power in Eastern Europe for the next 6 centuries. This isn't Kulikovo Field, the famous clash revered in Rus. It isn't Grunwald, where the Teutonic Order suffered defeat. This is the Blue Waters, a battle nearly erased from historical memory, yet potentially more significant than both combined. The question arises, why has such a pivotal battle virtually disappeared from history books? And what truly transpired on the banks of the Syniukha River that autumn? But before we uncover the answers, please let me know where you're watching this video from and what time it is for you. Share your comments below. I'm genuinely curious about the global time zones represented by our viewers. To grasp the immense importance of the Battle of Blue Waters, we must rewind history approximately 100 years. In 1240, when Batu Khan's Mongol armies swept through Eastern Europe like a hurricane, they didn't just conquer territories, they established an entire imperial system. The Golden Horde, or Uluk Ulus as the Mongols called it, meaning Great State, was more than a military force. It was a sophisticated administrative machine. From their capital, Sarai, on the Volga River, the Khans governed vast lands stretching from Siberia to the borders of Hungary. How did their system function? It was simple, yet effective. Russian princes, future rulers of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, had to travel to Sarai to acquire a yarlik, a sort of patent granting them the right to rule. They paid an annual tribute. They supplied warriors upon demand. And if anyone resisted, Mongol troops would appear to remind them of their authority with fire and sword. Yet, what's remarkable is that the Mongols rarely ruled directly. They allowed local princes to govern their people, uphold their laws, and even maintain their religions. The Golden Horde was solely interested in 2 things: money and power. It was pragmatic imperialism refined to an astonishing degree. And for an entire century, this system operated flawlessly. Under Khan Uzbeg, from 1312 to 1340, the Golden Horde reached its zenith. Trade routes from the Black Sea to China's Yuan dynasty thrived. Cities like Sarai blossomed into centers of culture and commerce. The Mongols adopted Islam, but remained tolerant of Christianity and other faiths. However, any empire built upon the strength of a single personality possesses inherent vulnerabilities. When powerful leaders die, things tend to unravel. In 1359, Khan Berdi Beg was assassinated by Kupa, one of many rivals vying for power, and the gates of chaos opened. A period that historians call the Great Horde, or the Period of Troubles, ensued, marking one of the most tumultuous eras of medieval history. Over 2 decades, more than 20 different Khans laid claim to the title of legitimate ruler of the Golden Horde. What was the average lifespan of a Khan during this period? Somewhere between a few months and 2 years. This wasn't merely a power struggle. It was a systemic collapse of the governing structure. The Golden Horde began fragmenting into separate ulus, each with its own warlord, each pledging allegiance to different Khans. By 1362, the year of the Battle of Blue Waters, the Golden Horde had effectively fractured into 3 distinct parts. Kelebek ruled from Sarai, Bulat Timur controlled Volga Bulgaria, and Abdullah held Crimea. Meanwhile, Mamai, a powerful warlord who couldn't claim the throne himself as he wasn't a descendant of Genghis Khan, directed puppet Khans from his Crimean seat. Consider this predicament. The Russian princes no longer knew where to go for their yarliks, to whom to pay tribute, Sarai or Crimea. And if they chose incorrectly, another Mongol army might appear to punish them. Some historians believe that the Black Death, the plague that devastated Europe and Asia in the 1340s to 1350s, severely weakened the Golden Horde's economy. Trade routes were disrupted, the population dwindled, and revenues from taxes and tribute plummeted. But perhaps more significant was the psychological breakdown. For a century, the Russian principalities had believed the Golden Horde was invincible. But now, witnessing Mongols killing each other for power, seeing no clear leadership, a question began to form in their minds. If they couldn't govern themselves, how could they govern us? It was at this juncture that Algirdas, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, recognized a unique opportunity. Algirdas was not a typical medieval ruler. Born around 1296, he was one of the 7 sons of Grand Duke Gediminas, a man who laid the groundwork for what would become one of Europe's largest states in the 14th century. But what made Algirdas exceptional wasn't just his family legacy, it was his strategic foresight. Upon his father's demise in 1341, Algirdas and his brother Kęstutis implemented a rather unconventional power-sharing arrangement for their era. They opted to divide authority. Kęstutis assumed control over the western borders, territories constantly assailed by Teutonic knights. Simultaneously, Algirdas concentrated his endeavors on the east, where prospering Rus principalities suffered under the weakening influence of the Golden Horde. This power-sharing pact is considered a remarkably effective model in medieval history, noted for its lack of rivalry and conspiracies, alongside a clear division of duties and mutual trust. This approach enabled Algirdas to dedicate himself entirely to his goals. What precisely were these goals? He aimed for more than mere territorial expansion. Algirdas possessed a more profound insight. He sought to forge a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state where pagan Lithuanians could coexist harmoniously with Orthodox Ruthenians, and governance would hinge not on oppression, but on shared interests. While this might appear idealistic, Algirdas's actual policies confirm his intent. He twice married Orthodox princesses. In conquered territories, he appointed Rus princes as governors, allowing them to rule according to their own laws and traditions. In Vilnius, the pagan capital of Lithuania, he erected Orthodox churches. He even elevated the Ruthenian language, or Old Belarusian, a precursor to modern Ukrainian and Belarusian, to one of the Grand Duchy's official languages. This was not archaic imperialism, but something qualitatively distinct. Around 1360, Algirdas embarked on his most audacious strategy, a direct assault on the Golden Horde's domains. Initially, between 1357 and 1358, he seized Chernihiv and Bryansk, northern Rus lands still paying tribute to the Horde. Subsequently, he advanced further eastward, capturing the Korsun fortress near the Don River, deep within Tatar holdings. These actions served as reconnaissance maneuvers. Algirdas was testing the Golden Horde's reaction. And what was that reaction? Virtually none. The Khans were too preoccupied with internal strife. Approximately 1360, Algirdas made a symbolic move. He deposed Fyodor, the last Kiev prince acknowledged by the Golden Horde, and appointed his own son, Vladimir. Kiev, the mother of Rus cities, the cradle of Slavic civilization, ravaged by the Mongols in 1240, now seemed under Lithuanian dominion. However, a complication arose. Formally, Kiev remained a vassal of the Golden Horde and was obligated to pay tribute. Algirdas's unauthorized appointment of his son was a direct affront. The Golden Horde, despite its internal turmoil, could not tolerate this. 3 Beks, rulers of Podolia, the southwestern region bordering Kiev, mustered their forces. They represented the interests of Abdullah, one of the Khans vying for power. Thus, the stage was set for the Battle of Blue Waters. In the autumn of 1362 or 1363, sources differ on the precise date, Algirdas led his army across the Dnieper River, heading southwest toward Podolia. This was no mere raid, but a carefully orchestrated campaign. Algirdas brought not only Lithuanian warriors, but also Ruthenian detachments from the territories he had conquered, including Smolensk, Bryansk, and Kiev. He demonstrated that this was not a foreign invasion, but a liberation, a factor that made the Lithuanian army particularly formidable at the time. They were not heavily armored European knights. The Lithuanian nobility during this period lacked the considerable wealth to afford expensive, heavy armor and war horses. Their primary strength lay in light cavalry, mobile, agile, trained to fight both mounted and on foot. But they learned swiftly. After almost a century of confronting the Teutonic knights, the Lithuanians had developed sophisticated tactics. They knew how to exploit terrain, understood how to feign retreat to trap enemies, and effectively combined cavalry with infantry. More importantly, they possessed what the Mongols lacked in 1362: unity under a single command. The two armies clashed near Torovitsa, a small town on the Syniukha River. The Mongols called it Yabu, the governor's city. The Rus called it Blue Waters. Why this name? No one knows for certain. Perhaps due to the color of the river's water or some disappeared geographical feature, but the name entered history. We possess only one detailed account of the battle, from Maciej Stryjkowski, a Polish-Lithuanian chronicler writing in 1582, more than 2 centuries after the event. Therefore, caution is warranted. However, his description aligns with what we know about the tactics of both sides. According to Stryjkowski, Algirdas arranged his army in 6 groups, forming a crescent. This was an unconventional medieval European formation, where knights typically arrayed themselves for a frontal assault. Why a crescent? Because Algirdas was anticipating classic Mongol tactics, mounted archery. Then, as anticipated, once the conflict erupted, the Tatar cavalry initiated flanking maneuvers against the Lithuanian formation, unleashing a continuous volley of arrows. This tactic had instilled fear in European armies for over a century, maintaining distance, moving swiftly, firing accurately, and avoiding close combat unless they possessed an overwhelming advantage. Yet this particular battle unfolded differently. The arrows proved largely ineffective. Strausskas notes, "Why did this happen? Perhaps Algirdas had learned from previous engagements. Alternatively, his warriors might have employed larger shields or enhanced defensive gear. It's also plausible that the distance the Tatar cavalry was forced to maintain, due to their crescent formation, diminished the accuracy and penetrative force of their arrows. Or, most plausibly, the quality of the Tatar cavalry in 1362 was significantly inferior to what it had been during the eras of Genghis Khan or Batu Khan. Seasoned fighters had aged or perished in internecine struggles, and new recruits were likely insufficiently trained. Financial difficulties probably meant both their horses and equipment were substandard. Regardless of the reason, the outcome was unmistakable. The archery attacks failed to achieve their desired effect. It was at this juncture that Algirdas made a decisive move. Instead of passively waiting and allowing the Tatars to continue their assaults, he issued an order to advance. The Lithuanians and Ruthenians, armed with spears and swords, surged forward. This was not a reckless charge, but a deliberate and organized progression, with the formation meticulously held with every stride. The Tatar cavalry, accustomed to adversaries who either stood their ground or attempted to pursue them into traps, found themselves facing an entirely new predicament. An unyielding force steadily closing in, compelling them to choose between close combat and retreat. At this critical moment, Kęstutis' sons, Algirdas's cousins, along with detachments from Nerdukos, launched a crossbow attack on the Tatar flanks. This marked the turning point. The crossbow, a weapon specifically developed in Europe to counter Mongol cavalry, boasted a greater range and penetrating power than traditional bows. Moreover, effective crossbow usage did not demand years of training. Attacked from the front by infantry and cavalry, and simultaneously assailed by crossbow fire from both sides, the Tatar ranks began to disintegrate. They couldn't maintain a safe distance, nor could they employ their customary mobile tactics. Crucially, they lacked support. In a conventional battle against a unified Golden Horde, reinforcements would have arrived by then, a reserve army would have mobilized, and actions would have been coordinated with other Ulyses. But in 1362, none of this occurred. The 3 bays of Podolia fought alone. The Tatar formation collapsed. According to Strausskas, they initiated a chaotic retreat. Militarily, this is the worst possible scenario for an army. Loss of order, loss of command, and every man for himself. Algirdas achieved a decisive victory. Following the battle, Algirdas did not pause. He pressed on directly into Podolia. According to chronicles, he liberated, a term used in Lithuanian sources, the land south of Kiev, the steppes beyond Ochakov on the Black Sea coast, from Putivl to the mouth of the Don. What did this imply? Essentially, Algirdas seized a significant portion of central and southern Ukraine, the most fertile and strategically important territories the Golden Horde controlled in the west. Even more intriguing was how he governed these newly acquired lands. Algirdas did not install Lithuanian governors everywhere. Instead, he granted Podolia to Kęstutis' sons, those who had fought bravely in the battle. He allowed many local Rus princes to retain their positions, demanding only that they shift their allegiance from the Horde to Lithuania. Most significantly, he declared, payment of tribute to the Tatars has ceased. Imagine this. For over a century, every autumn, wagons laden with silver, furs, honey, and slaves journeyed from Rus principalities to Sarai. This was a symbol of subjugation, the price of existence. Now, Algirdas declared, no more. The Golden Horde's reaction was virtually non-existent. They were too embroiled in their own internal conflicts. Abdullah Khan, to whom the three Podolian beys answered, was battling Murad in Sarai. Mamai was attempting to consolidate his power in Crimea. No one possessed the resources or the focus to retaliate against Lithuania. This highlights Algirdas's greatest strategic lesson: choosing the right moment. He did not attack the Golden Horde when it was strong under Oz Beg. He waited until they weakened, then struck swiftly and decisively. However, the true consequence of the Battle of Blue Waters extended beyond territorial gains. It encompassed a profound psychological impact. The Battle of Blue Waters marked a pivot point in Eastern European history in three key ways. Firstly, it shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility. For over a century, Europeans believed that the Mongols were insurmountable in a large-scale open battle. Previous successes, such as Liegnitz in 1241, were merely tactical defeats. Mongol forces retreated due to political considerations rather than military defeat. However, the conflict at the Blue Waters marked a turning point. This was a direct confrontation in terrain chosen by the Mongols themselves, and they suffered a decisive loss. News of this defeat quickly spread across Eastern Europe. Princes in Moscow and Ryazan began to ponder, if Lithuania succeeded, why couldn't they? Dmitry Donskoy of Moscow, who would later vanquish Mamai at Kulikovo Field in 1380, was likely directly inspired by Algirdas's victory, which occurred 18 years prior. Secondly, the battle fundamentally altered the power dynamics in Eastern Europe. Before the Battle of Blue Waters, Lithuania was a secondary, albeit significant, state, a pagan kingdom situated at the crossroads of the Teutonic Knights to the west and the Golden Horde to the east, struggling for its very existence. Following this momentous battle, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania rose to prominence, emerging as one of Europe's leading powers. Its dominion stretched from the Baltic Sea nearly to the Black Sea, from the Polish borders, and within a mere 50 miles of Moscow. This event established a strong counterweight to the burgeoning Moscow Principality. Over the subsequent 2 centuries, the rivalry between Lithuania and Moscow for the unification of the Rus lands shaped regional history. While Moscow ultimately prevailed, forming the foundation of Russia, Lithuania's existence as an influential power considerably slowed this process for centuries. Thirdly, and perhaps most crucially, the battle paved the way for an entirely new form of statehood. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania, under Algirdas and his successors, was not a simple national entity. It was a multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-confessional state. Lithuanian pagans, Orthodox Rus, Catholic Poles, and Muslim Tatars all coexisted within its borders. In 1569, when Lithuania united with Poland to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, this model expanded and endured for almost 200 years. This Commonwealth became one of the most tolerant political structures in Europe, a place where ideas about noble rights, religious freedom, and even early forms of constitutionalism were explored. Of course, it was not flawless, far from it, but it offered an alternative path to the absolutism and intolerance that were developing in many other parts of Europe. All of this began, at least in part, with Algirdas's decision not merely to conquer, but to integrate the lands wrested from the Golden Horde. Yet strangely, despite its profound significance, the Battle of Blue Waters has largely faded from historical memory. Very few contemporary documents describe it. Russian and Ruthenian chronicles mention it only briefly. Mongol sources are almost entirely silent. The most detailed account is the Tale of Podolia, a narrative included in Lithuanian chronicles written approximately 70 years after the event, during a period when Lithuania was contending with Poland for control of Podolia. Some historians have even questioned whether the battle occurred exactly as described, speculating if it was merely a series of minor skirmishes, later exaggerated by chroniclers into a major engagement. However, most modern scholars agree that something significant took place in the autumn of 1362 or 1363 near the Syniukha River. The evidence for this lies not in texts, but in its consequences: the sudden shift in sovereignty over a vast territory, the cessation of tribute payments, and the construction of Lithuanian castles and fortifications in Podolia. Why, then, was it forgotten? Political reasons played a role. After Lithuania's union with Poland in 1569, the Polish government had ample motivation to downplay Lithuanian military achievements to justify Polish dominance within the Union. Subsequently, when the Russian Empire conquered Poland and Lithuania in the late 18th century, Russian historians were incentivized to focus on Kulikovo, a Russian victory, and to disregard the Blue Waters, a Lithuanian triumph. During the Soviet era, the history became even more complex. Lithuania was part of the USSR, but emphasizing Lithuanian historical achievements could foster nationalism. Thus, the Blue Waters continued to be marginalized. Only after Lithuania regained independence in 1990 did historians begin to seriously examine this battle. Conferences were held in Ukraine in 1997 to 1998 and 2012. In 2022, the National Bank of Belarus issued a commemorative coin featuring Grand Duke Algirdas. History is being rewritten, or rather, recovered. So, what lessons can we draw from a battle that occurred over 660 years ago? Lesson 1. Timing is everything. Algirdas did not attack the Golden Horde when it was at its peak. He waited, observed, and prepared. When the opportunity arose, when his adversary was weakest, he acted decisively. In life, in careers, in any endeavor, knowing when to act is as crucial as knowing how to act. Lesson 2. Unity triumphs over division. The Golden Horde in 1362 had more warriors than Lithuania. They possessed greater resources and a longer military tradition, but they were fragmented. They engaged in more conflict with each other than with their common adversary. Lithuania, despite its smaller size, was unified under decisive leadership, and this solidarity proved to be a critical advantage. The third lesson imparted is that nothing is invincible. For over a century, the Golden Horde had appeared an indomitable force. Yet every empire, every system, every power structure eventually develops vulnerabilities. A leader's task is to identify these weaknesses. The challenge is to exploit them. The fourth lesson is that victory encompasses more than just territory. It involves a vision. Algirdas didn't merely reclaim lands from the Golden Horde. He forged an alternative framework for how a multi-ethnic state could operate. This model emphasized tolerance, local autonomy, and collaboration rather than subjugation. While not flawless and ultimately destined to fail, for over 2 centuries, it showcased alternative approaches to organizing governance. Finally, history is not predetermined. Had the 3 noble families of Podolia triumphed at the Battle of Blue Waters in 1362, the entire course of Eastern European history could have unfolded radically differently. Lithuania might never have transformed into a formidable power. Moscow would likely have unified the Rus lands a century earlier, and the model of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth might not have materialized at all. A single battle, one day's decisions made by a few individuals, altered the course of an entire continent. This illustrates both the power and the burden of human choice. On that autumn day in 1362, near a small river in Ukraine, 2 armies clashed. One embodied an empire that had once terrorized the world. The other carried the torch of hope. Hope that the small could still defy the mighty, that unity could overcome disunion, that history remained unwritten. By dusk that day, the Golden Horde, a powerful stronghold spanning from China to Hungary, had lost a considerable portion of its might and influence. It would never fully recover. Further fragmentation awaited it over the next 2 decades, and within a century, it ceased to exist entirely. Lithuania, a small pagan principality previously fighting for survival, emerged as one of Europe's largest powers. Its model of a multi-ethnic state, built on cooperation rather than conquest, shaped regional history for centuries. All of this unfolded thanks to Algirdas, a man who dared to act when others merely observed. Because he possessed a vision not just of conquest, but of creating something superior. Because he understood that the right timing, strategy, and purpose could transform the world. This is the essence of the Battle of Blue Water's lesson. It's not that violence solves problems. It doesn't. Rather, it's that in pivotal historical moments, individual choices hold immense significance. That nothing is immutable. That tomorrow doesn't necessarily have to mirror yesterday. And that sometimes, on the banks of a little-known river, history takes its decisive turn. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to avoid missing other stories from the forgotten past that changed the world. And don't forget to leave a comment about which historical event you believe has been unfairly overlooked. In our next video, we will delve into what happened next, how Algirdas and Lithuania continued their expansion, confronted Moscow, and ultimately formed a fateful alliance with Poland. This narrative of diplomacy, betrayal, and power is as enthralling as any film. Thank you for watching.